Colleen Hoover, has a large social media following. And not just large, but highly engaged.
What is going on with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni?
Have you heard anything about the rift happening behind?
What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars tries to silence the internet and it completely backfires? Blake Lively just sparked a legal firestorm after going after independent creators with subpoenas, demanding their private data, sources, and even their bank records. But instead of shutting them down, she ignited a backlash so massive that even the mainstream media couldn't look away. And now she's scrambling to undo the damage, facing accusations of harassment, possible legal sanctions, and a PR nightmare that could haunt her career for years. It started quietly. Just a few court filings, a handful of legal motions. But it didn't stay quiet for long. Blake Lively.
That's where we get into the smear campaign stuff, and we have learned a couple of things here. We've got answers under oath.
Long considered one of Hollywood's most polished and media-savvy stars, suddenly did something no one expected. She didn't just sue, she went to war with the internet. Instead of going after big-name publishers or official media outlets, Blake aimed her legal firepower at independent creators, YouTubers, small online reporters, and Twitter commentators who had merely discussed her ongoing legal issues became the targets of powerful subpoenas. These weren't light requests. They demanded personal data, email metadata, IP addresses, even banking and advertising records. And all of it was under the claim that these creators might be connected to what Blake called a coordinated smear campaign against her.
Hi everyone, I wanted to correct some more misinformation that I'm seeing about the Blake Lively case today and content creators.
The move shocked the online world. Why would a Hollywood actress direct her legal team at creators with no proven ties to her case? Why go this far? Then came the twist. Ryan Reynolds, Blake's husband and one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, wasn't named as a defendant, but his name still showed up in subpoena documents. That detail alone lit a firestorm of speculation. Was Ryan quietly involved behind the scenes? Was this more than just legal strategy? Blake's move looked less like protection and more like retaliation. The creators being targeted hadn't launched attacks. They had reported on court proceedings. They had shared opinions, and many of them had clearly stated they had no inside knowledge or ties to the case at all.
Do you think they're going to subpoena content creators? Do you think you're going to get subpoenaed, Dada Bowling?
No. But if anyone does.
But Blake's team wasn't subtle. They didn't reach out first. They didn't ask questions. They issued subpoenas and in some cases failed to properly notify the individuals involved. Instead, creators were caught off guard when companies like Google or X received orders to hand over their private data. Rather than silence the story, Blake's actions lit a powder keg. Content creators banded together. Legal experts chimed in. Journalists condemned the overreach. Within days, what began as a quiet discovery process became a full-blown scandal. Courtrooms, YouTube channels, and even mainstream news sites were buzzing with one question. Why was Blake Lively really doing this? Because it didn't look like justice, it looked like intimidation. And for someone who'd built her brand on being calm,
looks like Lively indeed did withdraw the third-party subpoenas to Google and X with respect.
Classy and calculated, this was something else entirely. The moment word got out about the subpoenas, the internet ignited. What was meant to be a quiet, behind-the-scenes legal maneuver turned into a full-blown digital rebellion. Blake Lively, who had cultivated a clean, composed public persona for years, was now being accused of something far darker, weaponizing the legal system to silence critics. The creators she targeted weren't big corporations or tabloid giants. These were small to mid-sized commentators, many with modest followings, some with nothing more than a microphone and a passion for storytelling, and yet they were being hit with legal demands for invasive data, Google records, IP addresses, financial logs, even advertising and monetization details.
In her efforts to prove this untraceable smear campaign happened, Blake Lively has sent out subpoenas to Google and
for simply discussing a public lawsuit. To many, it felt like overkill. Creators began posting videos titled, "Why did Blake Lively subpoena me?" and "This is an attack on press freedom." The court of public opinion was quick to respond, and it didn't side with Blake. What stood out most was the language in the subpoenas. There wasn't a clear accusation of defamation or wrongdoing, just vague references to a smear campaign and a search for anyone who might have participated. But when those participants turned out to be commentators with no proven ties to either side, it started to look less like a legal investigation and more like a fishing expedition.
Well, I just took a big L. Hello, my friend, it is Perez, the queen of all media.
It didn't help that creators were being notified late, or in some cases, not at all. Some found out their private data had been requested only after their platforms, like Google or X, formerly Twitter, informed them post-filing. That triggered panic. What else had Blake's legal team accessed without proper warning? Then came the lawyers. Motions to quash were filed fast. Some creators teamed up with others to fight the subpoenas jointly. They argued that this wasn't just overreach, it was intimidation disguised as discovery. One legal analyst noted, "This is an incredibly aggressive tactic for someone who claims to be the victim. These subpoenas are not targeted. They're broad, speculative, and dangerous."
Hell yes. Judge Lyman's making some calls early this morning in Lauren at Court of Random Opinion.
And the irony, Blake had once invoked journalistic protections herself in a previous lawsuit. Yet now, she appeared to be violating those same protections, demanding that reporters disclose confidential sources, private conversations, and even income. The hypocrisy didn't go unnoticed. This wasn't just a PR issue anymore. It had become a legal credibility issue. Judges don't take kindly to overly broad subpoenas, especially when aimed at protected speech. Legal commentators began predicting that not only would the subpoenas get tossed, but Blake and her legal team might face sanctions or public scolding for abuse of process. But beyond the courtroom, the damage was already done. Blake had picked a fight with the internet, and the internet fights back hard.
Just posted a YouTube video about this Blake Lively legal headache I'm dealing with right now, because Blake Lively subpoenaed.
And while she may have expected silence, what she got was the exact opposite. A tidal wave of creators, fans, and legal experts calling her out, questioning her judgment, and wondering, why was she really doing this? As the online storm intensified, something unexpected happened. Blake Lively's legal team began quietly withdrawing subpoenas. No press conference, no formal statements, just a string of court filings stating that certain subpoenas were being dropped, without explanation and without admitting fault. To the average person, this might seem like the end of the story. But for those who were targeted, it was anything but. Blake's team claimed that public statements by the subpoenaed creators—
It's legal affairs now, and it's Hollywood's hottest scandal. Actors Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni going head-to-head in the court of public affairs,
where they denied involvement in any smear campaign, were enough reason to back off. But that raised an obvious question. Why weren't these statements considered before the subpoenas were filed? Why had they gone to the extreme of demanding private bank records, IP addresses, and source information, only to back down the moment someone said, "I'm not involved"? It wasn't just careless, it felt predatory. Creators began speaking out. One said, "This was never about justice. This was about scaring people. If we didn't push back, they would have taken everything." Another added, "They backed off because we lawyered up." Not everyone can. And that was the real danger. Blake's team wasn't withdrawing all the subpoenas, just—
The judge overseeing this mess is a joke and a disgrace. And I basically just told
the ones attached to creators who had legal support, public followings, and the ability to fight back. Others were left in limbo. People without legal knowledge or resources were still vulnerable, unsure if their private information had already been accessed or if they'd be next. Some creators even suggested that Blake's strategy was to test the waters, see who resisted, who didn't, and move accordingly. It painted a picture not of a woman seeking truth, but of a public figure trying to scrub dissent from the internet with as little resistance as possible. What added to the outrage was the legal language used in the withdrawal letters. They weren't apologies or acknowledgments of overreach. They were clinical, calculated, and cold. They didn't rule out future subpoenas. They didn't promise to stop.
Blake Lively's team is responding to the backlash for all of these
They simply said no further information is required at this time. In other words, we'll be back if we feel like it. Legal analysts watching the case noted that this kind of legal back and forth isn't just messy. It can border on unethical. Weaponizing the discovery process to intimidate critics without clear legal justification has led to sanctions in other cases. And with Blake being such a high-profile figure, the scrutiny was only growing. Her once glowing image as a composed, thoughtful celebrity now had a new shadow, one that suggested overreach, suppression, and a willingness to use the courts to police public opinion. So while the subpoenas may have been withdrawn, the damage wasn't undone. Trust was broken. The legal line had been crossed.
Blake Lively, you have subpoenaed to see my bank account number, my credit card info, other private data of mine, including my address, etc.
And creators knew they couldn't let their guard down just yet. Because in Hollywood, silence doesn't mean peace, it means strategy, and this strategy was far from over. The moment Blake Lively's subpoenas hit the public record, the internet lit up, and not in her favor. What might have started as a quiet legal maneuver turned into a full-blown media firestorm. Independent creators were the first to ring the alarm bells. Channels, journalists, and influencers who had received subpoenas began posting videos, screenshots, and legal notices exposing the aggressive tactics being used against them. They didn't just object, they fought back, filing motions to quash and sharing their stories publicly. What started as a few voices soon became a wave. Many called Blake's actions dangerous, intimidating, and chilling.
Backfire Blake is living up to her name. Hello, my fam, it is Perez, the queen.
The idea that a Hollywood celebrity could demand the personal information of online reporters just for talking about her case was seen as a direct threat to freedom of speech. Then came the mainstream media. Outlets that normally steer clear of YouTube drama started covering the story, largely because the implications were too serious to ignore. It wasn't just about Blake anymore. It was about what her actions represented. A celebrity using her wealth and legal team to intimidate creators into silence. One journalist put it bluntly, this is how freedom of the press dies, not with a bang, but with a subpoena. Even legal experts began weighing in. Some warned that Blake's approach could backfire legally.
Big Bird Blake, also known as Burrito Bathroom Blake, has officially subpoenaed users,
pointing out that if the court viewed her subpoenas as harassment or abuse of the discovery process, she and her legal team could face sanctions. Others questioned whether she had any real legal grounds at all, or if the subpoenas were merely a scare tactic dressed up as due process. It wasn't just legal strategy being questioned, it was ethics. Why target small creators? Why not go after the sources directly if there even were any? Why demand bank records and IP logs if all you're trying to prove is defamation? By the end of the week, the optics had completely flipped. What might have been an attempt to paint herself as the victim turned into a narrative where Blake was now seen as the aggressor.
Blake Lively wants to silence us, and by us, I mean the content creators who have received a subpoena notice via Google. So we're all just
silencing critics, targeting independent voices, and weaponizing her celebrity status. And once that narrative caught fire online, it was nearly impossible to contain. Blake's silence only made it worse. She didn't release a statement, didn't clarify her intentions, and that vacuum was quickly filled with speculation, outrage, and memes dragging her legal crusade through the mud. This wasn't just a bad look. It was a reputational crisis. And the backlash wasn't slowing down. What made Blake Lively's legal crusade even more controversial wasn't just the subpoenas, it was the glaring hypocrisy behind them. Because not long ago, Blake herself had relied on the very protections she was now trying to strip from others.
So imagine for a second that you're a survivor of domestic violence, and you try to call out Blake Lively for her tone-deaf way of...
In a previous high-profile legal matter involving the New York Times, Blake invoked the New York Shield Law, a statute designed to protect journalistic sources and media freedom. Back then, she insisted that her communications with the press were privileged, protected, and off-limits to public scrutiny. But now she was demanding the private messages, bank records, and source information of independent creators, many of whom are journalists in their own right. The contradiction was stunning. How can someone invoke media protection laws 1 minute, then turn around and try to unmask, intimidate, and legally pursue others for doing the same thing? And the more legal experts examined it, the worse it looked. Some pointed out that Blake wasn't just asking courts to unmask.
Hey folks, it's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast. I've got a bonus episode for you right now that's gonna blow
creators. She was potentially endangering them by exposing sensitive personal data that had nothing to do with her case. Addresses, IP locations, financial records, all over a narrative she didn't like. Even worse, some of the subpoenas appeared to target individuals simply because they had criticized her publicly. There was no evidence they were part of any conspiracy, no proof they were working with the opposing legal team, just opinions expressed online that Blake didn't like. Critics quickly drew comparisons to other celebrities who had tried and failed to silence dissent through legal threats. The pattern was clear: sue first, scramble later. And that's exactly what seemed to be happening here. Legal insiders began warning that Blake's strategy was bordering on abuse of the discovery process.
Lauren, girl, you outdid yourself with this one. Okay, so if you weren't aware, Blake Lively and her legal team have
a serious charge that could result in sanctions or even court-imposed limits on her ability to file further subpoenas. To make matters worse, creators began highlighting a detail that hadn't received much attention. Blake's subpoenas didn't go directly to them. Instead, she went to Google and X, Twitter, asking for their private data without even notifying the people being targeted first. That's not just aggressive. To many, it felt deceptive. Instead of conferring with creators, verifying facts, or issuing polite legal inquiries, her team launched a data sweep, hoping no one would notice until it was too late. But people did notice, and now Blake was in the uncomfortable position of having to explain why she believed her privacy mattered more than anyone else's.
That's where we get into the smear campaign stuff, and we have learned a couple of things here. We've got answers under oath.
What started as a defamation case had now turned into a full-on debate about celebrity privilege, legal overreach, and the fragility of free speech in the digital age. And Blake was no longer holding the moral high ground. If Blake Lively expected independent creators to stay silent, she miscalculated. Because what happened next was something rarely seen in legal drama involving celebrities: a coordinated, public, and aggressive defense by everyday content creators. Rather than getting intimidated, many of the subpoenaed individuals lawyered up fast. Some joined forces, filing joint motions to quash, citing their rights under journalistic protections, privacy laws, and First Amendment freedoms.
I am the perfect example of a content creator who began speaking negatively about Blake Lively due to her behavior on the It Ends With Us.
Their argument was simple. Blake had no legal right to demand sensitive private data without real evidence of wrongdoing, and courts started to take notice. More importantly, the public did too. The moment these motions hit the docket, screenshots and summaries flooded social media. Legal YouTubers and journalists picked apart every detail, questioning the scope of the subpoenas, the logic behind them, and the real intent. The backlash was swift. Public sentiment turned not just among Blake's critics, but even from neutral voices who saw this as a dangerous precedent. And under that pressure, something changed. Blake's team began quietly withdrawing subpoenas. One by one, they started backing off, sometimes with no clear explanation. Legal observers interpreted it as a strategic retreat.
So apparently the judge has denied the content creators protection order.
Not because they had to, but because they knew what was coming if they didn't. At least one creator described receiving no offer to withdraw until their lawyer threatened immediate legal action on a weekend. In some cases, creators were notified only after the subpoena had already been filed and made public. There was no transparency, no courtesy, only damage control after the fact. To make things worse for Blake, her legal team's withdrawal letters included language that offered zero assurance that new subpoenas wouldn't be filed again later. It wasn't a real retraction, it was a delay tactic. And that only made creators fight harder. Some began asking for sanctions, penalties against Blake's legal team for abuse of process. Others requested protective orders, making it clear they wouldn't be dragged into court again without a fight.
I want to prove to anyone that doubts the content creators in this bullshit letter that Ezra Hudson submitted to the court where she bold-faced.
The tide had turned completely. Instead of silencing critics, Blake had inadvertently united them. Creators across platforms, many of whom didn't even know each other before, were now sharing resources, legal strategies, and updates in real time. What was meant to be a quiet show of legal force had turned into a very public example of a powerful celebrity getting outplayed by the very people she tried to intimidate. And worse, it was all unfolding in front of an internet that never forgets. For someone once hailed as one of Hollywood's most polished and likable stars, Blake Lively's carefully curated image is now unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. What started as a legal dispute has exploded into a full-blown PR nightmare.
Hi guys, I have another major update in this unfolding saga of the Blake Lively.
One that Blake can't blame on tabloids, anonymous trolls, or media bias. Because this time, it was her name on the subpoenas, her legal strategy under fire, and her actions driving the headlines. News outlets, which once fawned over her red carpet looks and wholesome brand, began shifting tone. The word harassment started creeping into coverage. The idea that a Hollywood A-lister was using legal muscle to bully independent reporters and content creators wasn't just a theory, it was playing out in real time. And for the first time in years, Blake wasn't being portrayed as the sympathetic figure. She was becoming the aggressor in her own narrative.
Letter to the judge. Look what happened this morning. It's a great day for content creators. Thank you, YouTuber.
Even casual fans began questioning her motives. Reddit threads, Twitter commentaries, and TikTok videos exploded with one central theme. Why would Blake Lively, of all people, go after small creators like this? The speculation was brutal. Was this about ego? Was she trying to cover up a deeper scandal? Was this an attempt to silence legitimate criticism disguised as defamation? The backlash wasn't just digital noise, it had real consequences. Brands began reconsidering partnerships. Publicists reportedly started distancing themselves. Media outlets once loyal to her began covering the controversy with sharper angles and less flattery. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already clear. She overplayed her hand.
Tell me the Hollywood Reporter's mad at you without telling me the Hollywood Reporter's mad at you. So in today's podcast episode,
To make matters worse, Blake's silence didn't help. No apology, no statement, no clarification. Her legal team spoke for her, and that made her look even more detached, calculated, and cold. If there was a way to control the narrative, she missed it. And in Hollywood, perception is everything. Her once golden image as the relatable starlet, the protective mom, the witty interviewee was cracking under the weight of her own decisions. She wasn't just fighting a lawsuit, she was now fighting for the survival of her brand. And the more people dug into her actions, the more clear it became. This wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern, an escalating series of missteps, all rooted in the same problem, an unwillingness to be questioned. From targeting journalists to
check out Tammy's comment on Omid's post.
Refusing transparency to weaponizing the legal system, Blake Lively had crossed a line, and the internet doesn't hand out second chances easily. At this point, Blake Lively isn't just dealing with a lawsuit, she's facing a crisis that could define the next decade of her career. The entertainment industry is brutal when it comes to reputational damage. You don't need a criminal conviction or a leaked scandal to be quietly sidelined. All it takes is the perception that working with you is more trouble than it's worth. And right now, that's exactly how many in the business see Blake. The ripple effects have already started. Her name, once a golden ticket for red carpet buzz and fan engagement, has become a red flag. According to reports from inside marketing departments,
I can't fucking keep up with this woman. What the fuck now? I think she's proper lost it.
Some studios are even testing trailers with and without her name to see which version performs better. Spoiler alert, the ones without her are doing better. That's the kind of silent treatment you get in Hollywood when you've become a liability. There's also a chilling effect happening behind the scenes. Publicists are privately advising their clients to keep their distance. Executives are muttering that Blake's brand is becoming too complicated. And producers who once saw her as a safe, bankable star are now asking a tougher question. Is she worth the drama? That's not just gossip, that's lost roles, canceled meetings, and vanishing opportunities. Even worse, Blake still hasn't addressed the controversy in any meaningful way. No statement, no press appearance, no sign of accountability. It's as if she believes staying quiet will make the storm pass. But in 2025,
I still, even though other creators have received their subpoena from Google, I haven't received mine in 3 days. Google has not.
Silence doesn't signal strength. It signals avoidance. And audiences notice. The very fans who used to champion her online are now posting threads, videos, and memes dissecting her every misstep. She's gone from being admired for her grace and intelligence to being scrutinized for her entitlement and lack of self-awareness. This is where things get dangerous, because once a celebrity becomes a meme, not for their talent, but for their behavior, it's incredibly hard to walk that back. Just ask the long list of stars who tried to wait it out only to fade quietly into irrelevance. And if you think Hollywood will fight to save her, think again. Studios don't have time to fix your image. They want safe investments, good press, and clean headlines. Blake's current situation offers none of that.
Did a Big Bird fan just give me a new nickname? Small Bird? I'll take it. Chirp, chirp. I've been working on.
She's not blacklisted, but she's not being called either. She's not canceled, but she's not trending for the right reasons. She's entered a far more dangerous zone, Hollywood limbo, not rejected, just ignored. And sometimes that's worse. The tragedy here isn't that Blake Lively lacks talent. She has plenty. It's that she miscalculated the moment. She underestimated how much the industry and the public value transparency, humility, and grace under pressure. And instead of addressing concerns, she attacked the critics. Instead of clarifying, she let her lawyers do the talking. And instead of pivoting, she pushed harder, alienating fans, spooking studios, and turning a minor PR problem into a full-blown brand collapse. Now, the only thing left to see is whether she'll recognize the hole she's in or keep digging.
Blake Lively has not withdrawn her subpoena for my YouTube account/Google account. My motion to quash will hit the...
Because at this rate, Hollywood isn't shutting her out. She's walking herself out the door. Blake Lively's Unraveling isn't the product of one mistake or a media witch hunt. It's the result of a pattern, a series of choices, statements, and legal tactics that turned a respected actress into a cautionary tale. What started as a legal dispute has spiraled into a full-on reputational collapse, not because the facts were against her, but because the optics were. She aimed to control the narrative, but ended up losing control entirely. With subpoenas flying, fans turning, and Hollywood quietly stepping back, Blake now stands at a crossroads. Not in court, in culture. She can double down and disappear into defensiveness, or she can face the reality that in 2025, your brand isn't built by your resume, it's built by how you respond when things go wrong. The saddest part, this didn't have to happen. Blake had every opportunity to course correct, to speak directly to her audience, to clarify, to apologize, or just to show a sliver of humility. But instead, she chose silence until it was too loud to ignore. Now, the question isn't whether Blake Lively will bounce back. It's whether the world will still be listening if she ever tries.